everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Big at the Back podcast, coming off 2 interesting game weeks. Matt, how are you?
I am good. I am just about fully recovered from our weekend stag do, where I had the unfortunate pleasure of sharing a room with you. But I'm okay. I've got my tea. I'm good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, we didn't get to watch as much football as we'd like, just because we were spending the whole time just doing far too many things that a true gentleman shouldn't be doing, I think, is a nice way.
The less said about it, the better.
Indeed. Well, look, we did manage to catch some of the football, limited amount, and obviously we kept an eye on FPL because we don't really have much else to do with our lives. So how have you got on the last 2 game weeks it's been now?
Yeah, obviously with the midweek games and us going away early Friday morning, we didn't really have time to squeeze in a podcast between the 2 game weeks, as there was one day in between them. I think a mixed bag pretty much sums it up. 24 was the first one, wasn't it? It all just blurs into one now. So yeah, 24 went fairly well, with the midfield really carrying me through with Jota, Coutinho and Bowen. Obviously, Coutinho, who we bigged up on the first pod, proving us right, making it look like we do know what we're talking about every now and then. And a couple of clean sheets from the usual likes of City and Liverpool. And, of course, the usual blanks from the strikers. Ronaldo didn't even start, came on, missed a couple of good chances. And as my captain, was very disappointing. But I think that's the lesson we're learning this season. It's just strikers just not worth the money. So, yeah, 24 was all right. 25, again, the sort of the slightly bigger at the back paying off. I brought in Robertson to go double up on the Liverpool defence with Trent. And that obviously paid off there. Sanchez keeping a clean sheet against Watford, who are still yet to score a goal under Roy Hodgson. So that's not looking good for any King or Denny owners like us. And yeah, it was, and obviously Pep Roulette struck everyone, I think, this weekend just gone. So yeah, it's been a mixed bag. I don't think anyone's particularly torn up any trees over these last 2 weeks. I think it's been a fairly consistent showing across the board.
Yeah, I agree. I also like that it wasn't just Coutinho, it wasn't just Bowen. Almost every player that you and I picked up on the last podcast delivered, except for the one we were saying you absolutely must have him, you can't not have him, which was Coutinho, who's got a 2 and a 1. Him aside, though, we picked up Coutinho, we picked up Jacob Ramsey, we picked up Zaha to an extent. So a lot of the picks we were speaking about paid off, but obviously we weren't clever enough to follow our own advice and get them in. So I've probably had a relatively similar experience to you. Game week 24, I had a really good game week. I think you had 75 and I had 73, but just like you, Coutinho, Bowen and Jota carrying me through. I captained Cancelo, which was a little bit smarter than captaining Ronaldo, but I fell into that trap this week. So this week I'm on 46 points. The only big hitters are Bowen, who doesn't really count because everyone has him at this point if they've got any intelligence, and Phil Foden. So I still have a Captain Ronaldo, David De Gea, and Cucurella still to play. So I'm probably expecting to end on about 55 points. So strong game week. I will have ended up with, at the moment, I'm sitting on a green arrow. I'm on about 31,000 or 31,059. So by the end of today, I should really be on about 30,000. So strong game week. Really looking forward to the double. Now, we haven't watched many of the games, but let's start with the obvious one, the one I know that you would have sat down after the stag do and watched intently, which is Leicester 2, West Ham 2. Talk to me. What are your thoughts?
There was a lot around the Kurt Zouma situation again. He was selected again in the starting lineup, but withdrew not long before the game due to illness. I think he limped out of the warm-up, but it was said he was ill, so we will watch that space. And as a West Ham fan, when that happened and I saw Issa Diop come into the starting lineup, I lost all faith in us getting anything out of that game because he has been absolutely useless lately. But that being said, he had a very good game, was probably one of our better players. But again, from an FPL perspective, it all came down to that man, Jarrod Bowen. He burst through on to an Issa Diop long ball, actually, and he very smartly taken finish to put us 1-0 up. Then the West Ham defensive frailties came in. Leicester actually looked pretty good in spells. Harvey Barnes was probably the most impressive player for them that caught my eye. He was giving out whoever was at right back, Soufal, and then Fredericks, when he came on, he was giving them a torrid time. So he was probably their most effective player. But obviously, from an FPL perspective, it was Ricardo and Tielemans with the goals. The penalty given away by Aaron Creswell, I don't know what happened there. He just jumped up, missed it with his head, and punched the ball away. So, yeah, and then Bowen with a good set piece delivery, which is what you're going to get with him, which is why he's got quite a few assists this season, most of them being from dead ball situations. He was definitely the most impressive West Ham player and still continues to be. Antonio didn't have a shot. I think Antonio's had 3 shots in his last 5 games. And you compare that to his first 5 games of the season, I think he had 20 shots. So he's just not getting in positions. He's not bullying defences like he was earlier in the season. And I would be getting rid of him, but I just don't know who I can bring in for him. It's that, like what we've been saying all season, there's just no strikers worth their money at the moment.
I think on Antonio, from what I saw on the Match of the Day highlights, he wasn't playing up front. He was playing as right mid. It was Bowen front and centre and playing as the striker, and Antonio was dropping in. He wasn't just dropping into midfield like, say, Harry Kane does when he plays, well, last season when he played well for Spurs. He was actually playing in the midfield, and sometimes he was dropping into right back. I think David Moyes is being clever in that he's knowing that Antonio has that flexibility and that Bowen needs to be the one that's front and centre at the moment because everything's going through Jarrod Bowen and he is shining. I mean, if we were saying it we were both saying it about 5 weeks ago, Jarrod Bowen, you need to have him, even if you don't have him already, even though he doesn't have a double coming up. He's got a single, and that single is against, I think it's Newcastle
Newcastle at home, Saturday lunchtime.
Yeah, I think he's an absolute must-have moving forward. Another game I did take a bit of an interest in is Spurs versus Wolves. And the reason I took an interest in it, because I was thinking, have we finally found a striker we can kind of lean on in Jimenez? And he's really entering my thoughts for the transfer coming up because he's got some nice fixtures. He's got a double. He plays in 27. I know Weghorst would have been perfect, but he's now injured, even though he's got a double-double, so that's frustrating. But as he's not an option at the moment, possibly Jimenez. I'm not sure. What's your Wolves defensively are incredible at the moment. Offensively, they can leave a lot to be a desire, and Spurs were utterly awful. But what are your thoughts? Did you get to watch any of that game? Did you see any of it?
Yeah, like you, I've seen the highlights of that one. Very much, I think Spurs were partly the masters of their own downfall in terms of giving the ball away at the back. Lloris's goalkeeping was horrendous for both goals. Should have caught the first one, and his poor pass put his defence under pressure for the second. But Jimenez is the one striker that's entered my thoughts this week as well. He's the Wolves' focal point. He had that horrific head injury, and before that, he was basically a go-to for most managers. But now that he's coming back a little bit, he seems to be finding his feet. He's definitely one that I am looking at potentially bringing in for this double. Like you say, it's Leicester and Arsenal, which they're not the best fixtures, but they're not the worst either. Leicester are defensively vulnerable. Arsenal, not so much, but still is, in terms of the overall striker picture at the moment, he's probably the only one that I think, he's worth a punt.
Yeah, I think there's another one worth a punt as well and worth moving on to him, and that's Broja. I know I mentioned him last week, but he looked fantastic at the weekend. And if you look at, I know they haven't got a double, Southampton, which is a little off-putting, but for me, I'd be bringing him in to go onto my bench. And even though they've got a single, it's against Everton. So Everton looked really good in the last game, and they beat Leeds 3-0, but Leeds haven't been at the races for a while. And how often is Iwobi going to have a game like that? So I'm really considering bringing Broja in. and he's a couple of million cheaper as well. I think they're the only two strikers that are worth even considering at the moment. Now, I mentioned Broja last week, and you scoffed a little bit. So, what are your thoughts on Broja at the moment?
Yeah, I think. Don't get me wrong. I'm looking. We spoke about him at the weekend as well a little bit, and his fixtures coming up are very nice. It's Everton, Norwich, Villa, Watford, and Burnley. So they're playing some teams right down the bottom, and he is obviously he's been fairly consistent. He's had a couple of returns over the last few game weeks. So, and at that price, if you're looking around that price, there's nobody better. I just think for myself at the moment, out of the two, provided you've got enough money to go for him, I would go for Jimenez. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with Broja coming in now. Like I say, it's not worth spending big money on the strikers. So if you've got the transfers, why not go for both?
That was going to be my next question. Is it a reasonable strategy to have a price cap of about 7.5 million on your strikers? And just have that cap. Don't even consider the likes of, who's in that bracket? You've got Kane, useless again. Ronaldo hasn't scored or assisted in 6 games now, 5 games, I think. Then you've got Firmino, Gabriel Jesus. You just haven't got any really good options in that bracket. So is it worth? And the way I'm thinking at the moment in terms of team structure, let's just go really, really small at the front. So I'll keep Antonio because there's no one else. King, I'll get rid of eventually. It's just not a priority, and he's going to be sub most of the time. And I'm thinking Broja as the third as well. And that doesn't really give me a route into Lukaku later, but I don't think I want that. I think I can go without. Just on that as well, in the World Club Cup final, Mason Mount looked like he fell very awkwardly and he went off during the World Club Cup final. That could, in my opinion, potentially impede Chelsea going forward for at least a few weeks or so as they come back. Is there anyone there you're looking at in terms of World Club Cup winners, best team in the world at the moment, apparently? Anyone you're thinking of in terms of after the blank, after game week 27?
I'd still probably only really be looking defensively. Potentially as players come back like Reece James, whenever he gets back to fitness. Obviously, Rudiger and Silva have been sort of staples for a lot of people this season because they're fairly solid at the back, Chelsea. Not so much in the last month or two, but especially in that early period of the season, they were very hard to break down. And, with their centre-backs, you get an attacking presence from set pieces as well. So there's always the options of them getting on the end of corners and free kicks. And then as you get forward, obviously, it's always rotation risks with Chelsea. They've got so many attacking players, the likes of Mount, Pulisic, Havertz, Werner, Lukaku, like all these players, and you can never really be sure who's going to be in that starting 11. And the price point they're at, you're sort of looking at players that you want to be playing week in, week out, because you need to maximise your return on that investment. So I'd probably look defensively, big at the back as always, but not so much going forward, unless Lukaku really hits form and starts banging in goals and gets a good run of games behind him. But I just can't see it happening at the moment. It's going to take some real turn and form.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. Okay, we could go through all of the fixtures, but as we didn't really watch them as intently as we would, I'd rather just dive into what's coming up. Now, double game week 26, this could be really make or break for anyone's season. And this could be really, really exciting. However, what I'd be keen to dig into with you today is your strategy, because after 26, you've got blanks for 4 teams, and in those teams are Arsenal and Liverpool. So keeping that in mind, do you have any particular strategies, be that with chips, be that with substitutes? What are you looking at going into the next 2 or 3 game weeks?
I think it's a matter of going all out on 26 at the moment. Then 27, getting out as many players as you can without using the chip, unless you really, really have to. So for me, particularly, I've got all my chips left. Still got my wild card, triple captain, both free hits, and everything involved. Plus, I've got 2 free transfers going into this week. So for me, it's going to be, I've got to get Salah back in. I don't think you can afford to not have Salah going into this double game week, which means I have to take one of my Liverpool players out. And that for me is potentially risky, is going to be Jota. Obviously, a lot of the stuff while Salah's been out has come through Jota. He had the big week last midweek where he got the 2 goals. But I just think out of the 3, I think there's so much, like 2 clean sheets is surely a must here for Liverpool. And that's instantly 12 points for Robertson and Trent, minus any potential cards or anything like that. And then plus, obviously, the possibility of assists. And I just think there's more potential for them than there is for Jota. I think it's the safer pick. So Salah comes in for me, which means I have to free up some money. So Ronaldo's going out for a striker, whoever that may be at this point. Probably Jimenez I'm leaning towards. And then I'll probably take a -4 as well. I'm thinking about getting Martinelli out for someone. And at this point, I don't know who that would be. I was slightly tempted by Saka because Arsenal do have a good double. But obviously that then leaves me with another player that doesn't play in 27. So I do have to have a little bit of a think about who exactly that's going to be. What about you? What's your thinking going into it?
Yeah, so similar. I've still got 2 free hits and triple captain and bench boost. I wildcarded quite a few weeks ago. I think for me, at the moment, my team's looking pretty good, pretty strong. But as said, I'm desperate to take out David De Gea and bring in Ramsdale, especially as defensively Arsenal's double looks really, really good. So that's going to be one move I'm making, and I'm going to drop Ronaldo and either Foden or Rafinha for Salah and Jimenez or Broja. I'm not sure. That will leave me essentially with 3 Liverpool players and 1 Arsenal player. That 1 Arsenal player is the goalkeeper, Ramsdale. All of them will be benched, and I'll still be able to get a full 11 out for the Arsenal-Liverpool double blank in 27, which means that I know there's a blank game week probably happening in game week 30, so I think we'll need at least 1 free hit for that. And then my second free hit, I'll probably use right at the end of the season in game week 38. I think that's a really fun way of playing and just completely changing your team right before the end. In terms of, I've read a lot on FPL Twitter, the minefield that it is, in terms of the triple captain versus the bench boost. And I think a really good bench boost, you'll get 15 to 20 points. I think against these 2 teams, Norwich and Leeds, both at home, triple captain on Trent or Salah will get you more than that. I also think there's an argument for potentially putting your triple captain on Diogo Jota, because I'm going with Jota, and I think the reason I'm doing it is the upside is far bigger than a Robertson. Robertson's safer, but Jota could score 3 goals against both Norwich and Leeds. And he is incredibly selfish. And that brace he got really does put him in good stead. He was due to start the last game as well, but he had a dead leg the day before. He's fine now, so I think he'll be ready to be fit and firing and starting both of Liverpool's home fixtures. So I'm saying all this. We all know that we're all going to triple captain Salah. Let's get that out of the way. That's 100% happening. But I think with Jota, there is an argument. I don't think there is with Trent or Robertson, but I think with Jota, there's an argument for potentially triple captaining him. And if Salah gets injured in midweek in the Champions League, I'll triple captain Jota. I think a Liverpool attacker against these 2 defenses, you'll never get a better opportunity to use that triple captainship. So that's where my head is at the moment. What are your thoughts? Anything you disagree with?
No, not at all. I completely understand what you're saying. Jota is obviously, there's so much potential upside there that you couldn't honestly convince me that it's a bad move to have Jota in your side. I'm not going for it, obviously, and I'm nervous that it could come back to bite me in the arse. So I just hope it doesn't. Like you mentioned, there's Champions League this midweek, so we have to wait for that to be out of the way. So Liverpool play tomorrow night, as we're recording this on Tuesday morning, against Inter Milan, who should be fairly tough opposition. So we'll see how they get on there. Obviously, Man City play tonight as we record this away at Sporting Lisbon. So it's going to be interesting to see how they line up. Obviously, we know what it's like with Pep. He will quite often, and with the massive lead they've now got in the Premier League, it would not be surprising to see him put big guns out in the Champions League games and maybe play more of a. It doesn't seem fair to call it a second string side because they're still fantastic, but his slightly less strong side in the league at the weekend. So wouldn't surprise me to see the likes of De Bruyne playing Champions League games and not Premier League games as much, because obviously they still are that the Champions League has still eluded them. So with that big gap, it makes sense for them to go all in on the Champions League this season. We'll see what happens there. Any injuries coming out of those games, but I think you will see a lot of people rushing to transfer in Salah and the likes now. I still think, and because they're worried about price rises, I understand that. And if you need to get him in before any potential price rises because you haven't got the money, then fair enough. But if you've got the money, you've got to wait until these midweek games are out of the way, because how many times have people been bitten by injuries in midweek after you've already made a transfer?
I also think as well, come on, we're on game week, 25 now. Game week 5, we were all playing the price rise game. Now, you shouldn't be playing it now. You played it previously so that you don't have to play it now. Just on the triple captain, I'm using it this week and it's going to be on Salah or Jota. That's 100%. It's happening. Obviously, Salah is the preference because it's Mo Salah. But there is, I think, an argument for, if you've already used your bench boost, for saving your triple captain until double game week 36, because it's looking like City will have a double of Newcastle and Brighton. So if you had used your bench boost and you only had a triple captain left, would you be tempted to hold the triple captain and not use it on a Liverpool player this week?
I would be tempted, don't get me wrong, but I think logically I would say strike while the iron's hot, in terms of, that there's a double now. Obviously, it's very likely that City will have that double in 36, but we don't know it yet. And the double of Leeds and Norwich both at home is a much stronger double than Newcastle and Brighton. Like, Newcastle obviously are down near the relegation zone, but they've won 3 in a row now. They look like they're turning things around a bit. Their January signings have come in. Obviously, they're now missing Trippier, who's gone off with a broken foot after Sunday's game, which will be a big loss for them.
Huge.
Especially seeing as he's come in, he scored 2 in 2, which isn't bad for a right back. But I just think by then you don't know what situation the league's going to be in. Man City could have wrapped up the league and be resting players for a potential Champions League final. I just think go with the known evil potentially of what is right in front of you. Just go with what you know. So I would say, although there's no right or wrong answer. Look, we could all triple captain Salah and he scores nothing in both games, and then City in 36, you go with someone like Sterling and he scores 2 hat-tricks, and we'd all be sitting here looking back going, oh, how stupid are we? But I just think it's the sensible choice.
Yeah, I am in complete agreement. To be honest, I wouldn't be tempted. I think I'm a Liverpool fan, so there is bias, but I think it's the week to use your triple captainship. And if it's almost a case of don't try and be too clever. Yeah. Don't try and be too clever. Keep it simple, stupid. Use your brain. You've got the best player against the worst 2 teams at home. You triple captain him. That's it. In terms of looking slightly beyond, actually, no, we're not looking beyond the double game week, because there's something else to discuss. In that a lot of the players that have single game weeks have really good fixtures. So I brought in Cucurella for this week, and he's got Burnley at home. City have Tottenham at home, who are dreadful at the moment. Kane and Son, both appalling in the last game. If you look at West Ham, they've got Newcastle at home. Aston Villa have Watford at home. So if you're holding on to the likes of Bowen, Coutinho, even Antonio, or even there's an argument for, if you've got the money, holding on to Ronaldo against Leeds away. These are players that could outperform a lot of the double game week players. And I think it's very dangerous and playing with fire to start moving them out. Would you be tempted to move any of those single game week players out with the fixtures that they have?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think the main doubles for this week are obviously the Liverpool one that we've already spoken about. The only other teams that have got like a fairly decent double is maybe Watford, but
Arsenal
slightly better, but who do you bring in really? Like
Ramsdale,
other than Ramsdale and White, which a lot of people have already got. I just think there's so many, like you say, there's so many good singles out there this week that they could easily outperform someone on a middling double. So I think, like you said, Aston Villa playing Watford, that's a big one. Like I say earlier, they still haven't scored a goal under Hodgson, so I can't wait for them to break that against Aston Villa and Luka Dean get 1 point again. But it's just bound to happen, isn't it? Like you say, obviously West Ham having Newcastle at home, Jared Bowen in the form that he's in, you'd be backing him to get something out of that. And Man City at home to Spurs, who just look absolutely devoid of any ideas offensively and defensively at the moment. So I just think that this has potential, and I'll probably come back to this comment this time next week, having got 0 points across the board. This has a potential to be a very big scoring week.
Yeah, I agree. I remember that first week when everyone got like 100 plus because everyone either captained Bruno or Salah. And then even the likes of Antonio just absolutely rocketed. I mean, at the moment, I think it could very much be 100 plus game week for a lot of people. It's just making sure you pick the right players. And when you're picking your players, don't neglect the people that have only got one game week. I would 100% be starting a Bowen or a Coutinho over Josh King, for instance. Just because King's got a double, Bowen and Coutinho are the players in form. I've got a bit of a tough situation in that I've still got Rafinha, and I think he's just, maybe it's a hangover from international duty, I'm not sure, but he was withdrawn at half time. He's just been off it in the past. He's still setting up chances, but he's not really taking shots. So what would you do if, I think you've got Rafinha as well. What are your thoughts on him at the moment? Or if you don't have him, what would you do?
Thankfully, I don't have him. So I think right now I would be looking to, again, if possible, get rid of. His recent form's been underwhelming. Like you say, whether international duties had anything to do with that. But if you also look at Leeds' form in general, losing to Newcastle, drawing with Villa, and then losing 3-0 to Leeds, to Everton. I did say watch this space with Everton under Lampard. But then their next fixtures are Man United, Liverpool, Spurs, and Leicester. Don't get me wrong, like they're not, other than Liverpool, they're not the strongest sides at the moment. But you just think there's probably going to be other players with a much better run and more potential. But then that being said, you'll probably transfer him out and he'll get 3 in his next 4 or something like that. So
he's on penalties as well. And I just think he's such a good player. So I've got to transfer out either Rafinha or Foden, and I'm leaning towards Foden. Foden, I'm thinking, okay, I've got the points. Thank you very much. I'm now getting rid before you get me 2-2-3 again. So it's probably going to be Foden and Ronaldo out for Broja and Salah. Is my thinking at the moment. And obviously taking a hit for David De Gea to Ramsdale with Foster obviously playing in Gameweek 27. So Rafinha's a really difficult one. Is there an argument perhaps for, at about 5.4 million, playing as a lone striker, Dan James?
Potentially, I think, and I said this last week, I find Dan James to be like a real pace merchant and not much end product. And then obviously he went and scored 2 goals against Aston Villa. So
classic.
I stand by what I said. I don't think he's a great player. His pace will make things happen and it will create chances. But I just don't think long-term he's going to get you much of a return. And like I say, just Leeds in general at the moment, their form is so patchy. They're struggling. Like Bielsa seems to have really gone off the boil compared to, say, this time last year when they came up and everyone, like they sort of almost took the league by storm at points, playing really good football. They just seem to be struggling a bit. Obviously, they've had no Bamford for most of this season. which when you lose a sort of a talismanic striker like that, it's going to really affect you, the way you play. But you'd think they'd have learned to deal with it a little bit better by now. So it's not in my thinking, but you could make an argument for it. And they, as I say, like most things I say, it will probably be proven to be untrue in the next week or so. So, yeah, in that case, go and do it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, he's basically guaranteed to score now. You've just spent a minute telling me why he's going to be bad. Yeah, I'm not going to do it. One thing I also want to bring up as well is I'm looking at the fixture difficulty rating. You were talking about bringing in Jimenez. I think I may be able to tempt you with Broja because Southampton's next 6 fixtures are Everton home, Norwich home, Aston Villa away, then Watford home, Burnley away, and Leeds away. Those are some really enticing fixtures. I'll probably bench Broja for this week against Everton just because he doesn't double up. But if we're looking at the rest of them, Norwich, Villa, Watford, Burnley, Leeds, these sides are all shipping goals. Whereas if you look at Wolves, they've got Leicester and Arsenal, then they've got West Ham away, Palace, Everton, and then Leeds, Villa, Newcastle. I think, considering the fixtures, I'm fully under Broja hype train. I wish that Ian Nacho was playing for Leicester because he would solve all of my striking woes. Starting game in, game out. Ian Nacho, you're my boy. I want to buy you and keep you and captain you every week. But just Brendan Rodgers is a bell end. So there's just no hope of that happening at the moment. So in the absence of Ian Nacho, I'm going to say Broja is the one to get. And I'm going to put my foot down and say Broja over Jimenez.
Well, I am definitely let's make this happen now. So over these next 6 game weeks, I'm going Jimenez, you're going Broja. We have to get some sort of incentive in this. We need to make some sort of bet as to who's going to get the most points over these next 6 game weeks.
Well, we don't really bet money, do we?
No.
Slap bets?
I tell you what, let's just put a tenner on it. Let's keep it nice and simple. A tenner on it the next 6 game weeks. Because you've obviously got Broja with those fixtures, and don't get me wrong, they're good fixtures. Jimenez has got the double, one of which is Leicester, who are defensively a little bit shaky.
Mm-hmm.
West Ham, who, again, I say this as a West Ham fan, defensively poor. Yeah. Then Palace, Everton, Leeds, and Villa. Like Villa, not so much, but Palace, Everton, and Leeds. And I think a good Wolves side, he's more sort of fixture-proof than a Southampton side, where there's always potential for rotation with Adams and Armstrong, etc. So I'm on the Jimenez hype train. You're on the Broja hype train.
Interesting. No, I like it. I think that's good. Yeah, obviously Jimenez having the double, but it wouldn't matter because I'd bench either of them this week anyway. But yeah, let's do it. Next 6 game weeks, we can talk about Broja versus Jimenez. In terms of future planning, we mentioned already, but game week 30 is looking like it's probably going to be a blank for about all but 4 teams or something like that. So I think if you've got a free hit, you should be saving for that. I also think from, say, March onwards, we need to be stacking up hard on Chelsea again. I'm looking at Rudiger, who I will probably be bringing in at around that point for Region, who I'm desperate to get rid of now because he's just not playing. So I think Rudiger's a must-have for game week 28 onwards. I'm not sure, is there anyone else who's worthwhile at Chelsea? I really want someone in the midfield to be worthwhile because I'd love to double up on them, but I just don't see it anywhere at the moment.
No, I mean, like you say, I've just looked at those fixtures as well. Burnley away, Newcastle at home, Norwich away, Brentford at home, Southampton away, and like all 2s on the FPL difficulty rating. So, like you say, that is some prime opportunity there to load up on any potential Chelsea players. Like you say, Rudiger's probably the obvious one. Yeah. It depends on when when Reece James will be back. Not Dan James. If Reece James is back, I'd probably be looking at getting him in. It depends what's happening on the other side of the fence. Will Alonso be playing? Will Azpilicueta be playing anywhere along there? Maybe in the back 3. It's really one to watch what they're doing. But in terms of midfield, like you say, And like I said earlier, there's so much rotation possibility. Georginio is probably the one that's been most consistent in terms of play time, and he's on penalties. That's the only reason I'd consider him. And then obviously it's if Lukaku gets firing. If he comes back from the Club World Cup, he got a goal in the semi-final, a very scrappy sort of goal-mouth scramble that he just ended up firing in. But he was right place, right time. And if he gets going, then he's one potentially worth looking at because, like I say, those fixtures, you do want to be stacking up. Werner, don't even talk to me about him.
Timo Werner. Oh, I think he's got the most amazing goals versus expected goals stat. He's single-handedly destroying the expected goals accuracy. Just so bad at finishing. Georginio, who you mentioned, is just, in my opinion, the anti-fun player. Like everyone, like I think it's been coined by Always Cheating that make fantasy fun again. Georginio is just not a fun player. He's boring. He's shit. He's a cheater because he cheated against England in the World Cup probably, or the Euros probably. But yeah, I'm just not interested in having Georginio at all. I never will be. I hate him. I think he's a piece of shit. I don't think he should have been in contention for the Ballon d'Or. Him coming out and saying, "Oh, I should have won it. Go away. You're rubbish." Rant over.
Can you stop sitting on the fence and tell me how you really feel?
Maybe next time. Cool. So we are looking at a big double game week ahead. Do you want to just quickly rattle through your team and what it will be if all goes to plan?
So, yeah, if all goes to plan, it will be Ramsdale in goal, Cancelo, Trent, Dean, Robertson, then a midfield of Bowen, Bernardo Silva, Salah, Coutinho, and depending on exactly what I do in my transfers, maybe even one other in that midfield. And then probably Jimenez up front over Ronaldo. I'm still tempted with playing Emmanuel Denny as well, but we'll see if he gets into my starting 11 or not.
Yeah, I'm very, very similar. So my 11 is looking like Ramsdale, because I'm going to bring him in. Then across the back, I'm going to have Cancelo, Trent, Digne, and Reguilon, because surely Reguilon's got to play now. Surely, given how bad Sessegnon was. Across the middle, I am going to be having Rafinha, Coutinho, Bowen, Jota, and Salah. And up front, it's going to be either Josh King or Broja or Antonio. I'm not sure which one yet. Josh King's got the double, but Broja and Antonio have nice fixtures. Broja I think it's going to be Josh King. Let's give him one more chance. Is my mantra with him. He's got a relatively nice double. Maybe he can get Roy Hodgson's side firing. I doubt it, but maybe. So I think that's going to be the crux, and that's going to be the difficult area. I'm so glad I'm finally getting rid of Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, that feels nice. I will say I did, from the match of the day highlights, Emmanuel Denny did look very selfish at times, but he did hit the bar. He pulled a good save out of Sanchez as well. So if anyone's going to get it, I feel like he's the one purely because he's very selfish. But I just, at the moment, I can't see it really happening. I do just want to give a quick shout out to one of my co-hosts on the Pretty Bubbles podcast, Jamie, who, with Diego Jota coming on for 20 minutes at the weekend, did mean that his first sub, Anthony Gordon, was left on the bench with 14 points.
Ouch. Oh, goodness me.
So that made me laugh.
Yeah, I think that's always the way, isn't it? I saw someone had a bench of Lamptey, Anthony Gordon, and Diogo Jota. Or no, it wasn't Diogo Jota. There was one other that got really big returns. I can't remember who. But yeah, he had about 40 points on the bench. Hopefully that's not us or any of our listeners this week, or hopefully it's Matt, but none of our listeners, and certainly not me.
No need for that, is there?
But I think that is probably what we've got time for today. It's a much shorter episode because it's an actual reasonable podcast time this time. We're not going through everything. But good luck, everyone. You can find us on Twitter at Big at the Back. Go and follow us on there. We have loads of interesting and engaging and insightful and not at all ranty tweets. Where else can people find us, Matt?
You can find myself on my personal Twitter at Higgins92. And obviously, if you're interested in more thoughts about West Ham in general, and more specifically, our fixtures and everything that's going on around West Ham, around the Kurt Zouma situation, you can find me on the Pretty Bubbles podcast as well, available on all podcast platforms. We are on YouTube at Big at the Back. You can find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much anywhere you will get your podcasts. And obviously, like Tom said, get involved with us on Twitter. We're both on there. We will be responding to any tweets. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. What are you doing with your team this week? Just come and get involved.
Yeah. Talk to us. We're lonely and we need friends, is what Matt said.
I can't just talk to Tom all week.
Please. We shared a room over the whole weekend. That was enough. Thank you, everyone. Good luck in game week 26. And we'll see you directly after the next game week with no delay this time.
Maybe.